You're listening episode 8 featuring of a true story shared by the author, Kamnap.
Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. If you're new to the show, we do these deep dives into different historical sources. And today, we're continuing our exploration of life under the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia.
Right.
Through Kamnap Rithia's really incredible memoir, 4 Years and 9 Days.
Yeah.
And just a reminder for new listeners, this is based on a Khmer poem that was translated and adapted into English.
Yeah.
Which really gives it, I think, a different feel than a lot of other memoirs that you might read from this period.
Absolutely. There's a real poetic sensibility to the language and imagery. It's quite striking.
One of the things that's really interesting is that Rithia uses the present tense, which makes you feel like you're right there with them as they're going through these experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. In our last deep dive, we left off with Rithia really grappling with the realities of forced labor, like the complete upheaval of his life as he knew it. I mean, can you imagine having your entire world turned upside down like that?
It's really hard to fathom, isn't it? I mean, we saw how even simple tools were considered suspicious by the Khmer Rouge. Like just possessing something like a saw could get you in trouble.
It's crazy, right? Yeah. And in today's deep dive, we're going to journey further with Rithia as he navigates life in this Phuom Kres village. Specifically, we're looking at sections 4, 5, and 6 of chapter 6. These sections are packed with details about the daily struggles and also moments of surprising, I guess you could say, kindness.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating mix of brutality and humanity, which I think is what makes Risia's account so compelling.
For sure. Okay, so let's jump right into section 4, Becoming Farmers. We're in May 1975 now, and Rithia's, really trying to learn the ropes of this new life as a farmer. And he even seeks out guidance from this man named Ta'el on how to make fishing traps.
That's right. But what struck me in this section is how the Khmer Rouge even controlled language itself.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You mean like with the word Ta?
Exactly. Traditionally, Ta meant grandpa, or it was a term of respect for an elder. But under the Khmer Rouge, it was reserved solely for high-ranking officials. Even that small change had big implications, didn't it?
Oh, for sure. It's almost as if they were erasing the traditional hierarchies and replacing them with their own and creating this atmosphere of, fear and obedience.
Exactly. And this manipulation of language was just one of their tactics.
Yeah. And then there's this constant search for dissidents. People just disappearing overnight, Buddhist statues being thrown into swamps.
Yeah. The destruction of religious symbols was no accident. It was a very deliberate strategy on the part of the Khmer Rouge to eliminate any competing ideologies or sources of authority, It's something we've seen in other totalitarian regimes throughout history.
Oh, definitely. It's heartbreaking, especially when you think about how many innocent people were caught up in this web of paranoia and suspicion. Anyone could be labeled a dissident.
Right. And yet, amidst all of this darkness, we find these glimmers of human connection and resilience.
Yeah, like in section 5 with Ta'el. So he's the one teaching Rithia about the fishing traps, right?
Yes, and he and his wife show incredible kindness to Rithia and his family, even though they're essentially forced to share their home with them.
Which is where we see this whole concept of Angkar come into play, which the Khmer Rouge used to mean the organization. They presented themselves as this benevolent force, redistributing wealth and creating a more equal society.
Right, but the reality was that Angkar acted as both provider and thief, taking land and possessions from people who had worked hard to build a life for themselves. And Ta'el's story is such a perfect example of this.
Oh, totally. I mean, he built his wealth through years of hard work,
And remember, Ta'el was successful before the Khmer Rouge.
Oh, right. Tell me about that.
He built his life through hard work. He cleared land, created these rice fields. He was the embodiment of that self-sufficiency that existed before the Khmer Rouge came in and said, everyone has to farm.
Wow. The irony.
I know, right?
And then he even warns Rithia's family to hide this huge jar of sugar, over 50 kilograms, because even the smell of syrup could attract unwanted attention.
It's incredible how deep that paranoia ran, right?
It's just wild.
Yeah.
I mean, TL even said that poverty in the past was because of laziness.
Right.
Which makes you question the regime's whole narrative about land ownership being this big problem,
Yeah, were things really that bad, or was that just propaganda to justify their power grab?
It's a good question.
Definitely.
Especially considering Ta'el's story, right?
Yeah.
But by the end of May 1975, we find Rithia and his entire family, all 36 of them, crammed into a traditional Khmer house.
36 people. Wow, that's hard to even imagine.
I know, right?
Rithia describes the upper level for living, the lower level for livestock.
Oh, wow. Only to have it all stripped away. by the very regime that claimed to be liberating the poor. Like, the irony is just astounding.
It really is, and it gets even more heartbreaking when we learn about his children.
Oh, yeah, his children.
Right.
All conscripted into the Khmer Rouge army. His youngest was only 2.
2 years old. Can you imagine the anguish?
It's just devastating. And it really makes you wonder how people like Ta-El, who had experienced such loss, could still find the strength to be kind to others. I mean, it's remarkable.
It really speaks volumes about the resilience of the human spirit, doesn't it? That even in the face of such horror, people could still find it within themselves to show compassion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I think it's these stories of human connection that help us grasp the true complexity of this period. Because it's easy to get caught up in the larger political narrative.
Yeah.
But it's the individual experiences that really bring it to life.
You're so right. And speaking of complexity, in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to delve into Section 6. We'll see how the Khmer Rouge meticulously organized village life, which was yet another way for them to assert control and maintain their power.
So stay tuned for that.
It's easy to focus on the big picture, like the political stuff, but it's these little things like Ta-El sharing a sugar that really get to me.
Yeah, it's like a tiny act of defiance in the face of this overwhelming oppression.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder how many other stories like that went untold, right? Like little acts of kindness and resistance.
Totally.
Yeah.
And, I think that's part of what makes Rithia's story so powerful. He doesn't shy away from the brutality, but he also shows us these flickers of humanity that persisted.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so moving on to Section 6, we get a closer look at how the Khmer Rouge organized village life. And this was another way for them to control everything, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, everything was about routine and obedience.
Yeah.
Rithia talks about the ringing bell, the Angkar directives, the constant fear of the village chief.
It was a system designed to crush any sense of individuality.
Yeah, like they were trying to create a human machine or something.
Right.
No room for personal expression.
Right, and they used these really clever tactics, too, like dividing the villagers into old people and newcomers.
Oh, yeah, that was so manipulative. Like, they preached equality, but then created this hierarchy that pitted people against each other.
Classic divide and conquer.
And then there was the forced labor. Everyone had to work. Even children were collecting cow dung. It's crazy.
Well, it was all part of their plan for agricultural self-sufficiency. They wanted to transform Cambodia into this purely agrarian society.
Yeah, it's just amazing how they controlled every aspect of life. From the language people used to, the way they worked.
It's a chilling example of what happens when power goes unchecked.
But even in those dark moments, there were these little glimmers of ingenuity. Like, remember that detail about Rithia soaking palm leaves in mud?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Shows how resourceful they were.
Right, but it also shows the lack of hygiene.
Oh, yeah, how so?
Rithia says the stench of that mud stayed on his hands for days, even after trying to clean them with ripped palm fruits.
It's those little details that really hit home, don't they?
Absolutely. It's a reminder that this wasn't just some abstract historical event.
Yeah.
This was real people's lives filled with hardship and deprivation.
And it makes you wonder how they were able to establish this level of control. So it wasn't just backbreaking labor. It was actually a traditional building technique.
You're right. Soaking the leaves in mud would help preserve them and make them more durable for roofing. It's kind of fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it shows that even in this incredibly oppressive environment, people found ways to hold onto their traditions and make the best of what they had.
Absolutely. So we're seeing this real contrast between the brutality of the regime and these little flickers of resilience and hope.
For sure. It leaves you with a lot to think about. Like, how did people like Rithia and Ta-El maintain their humanity? What gave them the strengths to keep going?
Those are some really important questions, and I think in our last part we'll try to address some of those. We'll look at some of the key takeaways from Rithia's story and what we can learn from his experience about resilience, hope, and the power of the human spirit.
It's amazing, isn't it?
What's that?
Just how resilient people are. Like, even in the face of, unimaginable hardship.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Rithia's story is like a testament to that, isn't it? To the fact that, like, even in the darkest of times, humanity can endure.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it makes you realize that history isn't just about, like, dates and battles and, big political movements.
Right. It's about individual stories, like those small acts of kindness, like Ta-El sharing his sugar.
Exactly. Or Rithia, like, learning those traditional building techniques.
Yeah.
Those are the things that really bring history to life.
They show the human cost of these events, like what it really means to live through something like that.
Yeah. Like the psychological impact of that kind of control.
It must have been incredibly dehumanizing. To have no agency, to have every minute of your day dictated by Angkar.
It's interesting that you say Angkar because they use that term, right?
Angkar meaning the organization.
Meaning the organization.
Yeah. It became synonymous with the regime itself.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just physical labor, right? They controlled language, too.
Yeah.
They introduced a whole new vocabulary, replacing familiar words.
Like they used economist.
Yes. Economist instead of cook or chef.
Right.
It's almost as if they were trying to control how people thought by changing the way they spoke.
It's like they were trying to rewrite reality itself.
Exactly.
Using language as a tool.
Language can be a powerful weapon.
To erase the past.
Absolutely. They were reshaping not only the physical landscape of Cambodia, but also its mental and cultural landscape.
Wow. And they remind us that even when a regime tries to control everything,
Yeah.
Like every aspect of people's lives.
From the words they use to the way they work.
Yeah. Those little sparks of individuality, those moments of hope, they're so hard to extinguish.
And they're what make us human, right?
Wow.
Like even when everything is stripped away, there's still that something inside that refuses to be crushed.
I think that's such an important takeaway for, anyone, really. Like, we may not all face the same kind of oppression that Rithia did.
Right, but we all have our own struggles.
Exactly. And his story reminds us that, even when things seem hopeless, there's always that possibility for resilience, for compassion, for finding those glimmers of hope.
That keep us going.
Yeah.
It's like this reminder that we have a choice. Even in the darkest of times, we can choose how we respond.
Absolutely. And Rithia's story also serves as a warning, doesn't it? About what can happen when power goes unchecked.
Oh, definitely. It's a reminder that, we have to be vigilant about protecting human rights and freedoms.
Because it's so easy to take those things for granted.
And once they're gone, they're so hard to get back.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into 4 years and 9 days, I think it's worth asking ourselves, what lessons can we learn from Rithia's experience? About resilience and hope and the power of human connection.
And how can we apply those lessons to our own lives, to the challenges we face in the world today?
Because I think Rithia's story shows us that even in the face of unimaginable suffering, there's always a reason to keep believing in humanity, to keep fighting for a better future.
I agree. And I think that's a message that's more relevant now than ever.
So until next time, keep diving deep.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope it left with you a deeper understanding of this complex chapter in history. Don't forget to comment, follow, subscribe, and share with your friends to stay updated on our upcoming episodes.